What's up, everybody? This is Alex Christoforou with the Duran, and I have with me Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. And today we're going to be taking a look at Bruce Ohr and Michael Cohen. All right, Alexander, I said Bruce Ohr and Michael Cohen for a reason, because you are going to explain the significance of one story that is not getting much press at all, which is the Bruce Ohr story on the Hill via John Solomon, and the story that is getting all the press. I don't know why it's getting all the press. You'll explain why, which is the Michael Cohen story via BuzzFeed. And this is a very fascinating contrast in narratives. And I would say it's a good primer on how propaganda, is disseminated. Go ahead, Alexander. Explain these two stories. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Alex, because, of course, we have one story which is of enormous importance, which is the Bruce Ohr story, which goes right to the heart of the origins of the whole Russiagate investigation and the absolutely phony basis upon which that investigation was brought, and which exposes what looks like, frankly, very suspect and even serious misconduct by people in the FBI and the Justice Department. And that's the story about Bruce Ohr, which, as you correctly say, was in the Hill. And then we have a story which apparently has not been sourced properly about Michael Cohen, originating possibly with Michael Cohen, a serial fraudster and convicted liar, which apparently is being picked up by BuzzFeed, is being picked up by the Democrats in Congress, which is now going to be the subject of investigations. Can I deal with the Bruce Ohr story
first? Go for
it.
Start breaking down both stories. Yeah, break down both stories.
Yeah, okay. Now, what we now know, and can I just stress, this appears to be conclusive. You mentioned the story by John Solomon in The Hill, but there's been a supplemental story by Byron York in the Washington Examiner, which goes into more detail and which is clearly based on sources from congressional investigators.
And we'll place the links to both those stories in the description box, so our viewers can see both those stories.
Exactly. Now, the key point to understand about this story is that Bruce Ohr, who was at that time number 4 in the Justice Department, was one of the first people to have contacts and sight of the famous dossier that Christopher Steele produced. We now know that he saw it in 2016. We know also, in fact, we've long known that his wife works, in fact, for Fusion GPS. That's the company that paid Christopher Steele for the dossier on behalf of the Hillary Clinton campaign. And that in July 2016, that is to say, during the presidential election, at about the time that the Russiagate investigation itself was launched, and before the whole of the dossier was written, he was already advising senior people in the FBI and in the Justice Department that this dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, was not, therefore, wholly reliable, and that its creator or, if you like, compiler, Christopher Steele, was extremely biased against Donald Trump. Notwithstanding that the FBI and the Justice Department had all this information, they then went ahead and used this dossier to obtain warrants from the FISA court to carry out surveillance of the Trump campaign aide, Carter Page, without telling the FISA court either who had paid for this dossier and who was the party for which it was produced, which was Hillary Clinton's campaign, or that Christopher Steele, its compiler, was massively biased against Donald Trump. In other words, the FBI and the Justice Department knew that this was a dodgy dossier right from the start. Throughout the Russiagate investigation, they nonetheless used it to carry out surveillance, to obtain warrants to carry out surveillance against Carter Page, and for all we know, others also, and they did not disclose what they knew about its dodgy origins to the FISA court. Now, I think that is huge. I think that is extremely serious, and it is important to stress that this dodgy dossier produced by Christopher Steele is, as of today, the only actual evidence anyone has produced of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. We now know that it has not been verified. We now know that lots of the information contained inside it is wrong. And we now also know, as a result of this information that John Solomon has provided us, and which has been commented upon by Byron York, that the FBI and the Department of Justice had good reason right from the start to doubt that it was true.
And Rosenstein signed on those FISA warrants, Rod Rosenstein.
He absolutely did, which is one of the reasons why I have always said that he has a very severe conflict of interest and should never have been involved in the Russiagate investigation. He should not have been the person to appoint special counsel, who was Robert Mueller, and he was absolutely not the right person to supervise that investigation by Robert Mueller, because he took steps in this investigation out at the outset, signing off on these FISA warrants based upon a dodgy dossier, which the Department of Justice and the FBI had information about right from the outset that it was dodgy. So, as I said, Rosenstein, and I know I'm not the only person who thinks that.
So they knew right from the beginning that Steele had a thing for Trump. He wanted to get him. The FBI knew, the DOJ knew, Comey knew, Rosenstein knew. They all were in the know. Incredible story that is not getting any press at all. Now go to the story with Michael Cohen that is getting all the press, which is, to this day, I think is the stupidest, most ridiculous narrative that you can think of for a Trump-Russia collusion line to take. I mean, it's just beyond stupid. And we've done a video on this in the past as well.
Yes. Yes. I mean, let's resume about what Michael Cohen is. I mean, Michael Cohen, who was a lawyer, is a convicted fraudster and a serial liar. The Southern District of New York, in its statement to the court to obtain a sentence against Cohen, has also said that Cohen has consistently exaggerated the importance of his connection to Donald Trump.
The court
Nonetheless,
said that. The court said that.
Sorry,
the court said that.
And the district attorneys of the Southern District of New York, that is so. Nonetheless, BuzzFeed has run this incredibly poorly sourced story, and without, it seems, looking at any of the evidence behind it, written by a journalist with a dodgy reputation going back more than 10 years, to the effect that Michael Cohen, instructed by Donald Trump to lie to Congress about this complete non-issue, which is this. I mean, I cannot understand what the importance of this story is. We've discussed it in previous videos. The fact that Trump or members of his organization may have had some ideas about building a hotel in Moscow, it seems to me is wholly irrelevant to this whole Russiagate story. And of course, that hotel was never built anyway. So I mean, the whole thing is nonsense. Yet the Democrats are running with it. There's talk about congressional investigations. There's talk, the media are running with this. And you already see people saying quite absurdly that this is some kind of smoking gun when it obviously and plainly isn't. They are overlooking the serious information that we have from John Solomon in the Hill about grave misconduct in the Justice Department and the FBI, and they're seizing upon this non-story about what Michael Cohen, a person no one should believe, says he might have been told by Donald Trump about a hotel deal that never happened.
And if he was told, let's say that Cohen is being 100% honest and Donald Trump told him to say a couple of things about a hotel deal in Moscow. So what? What does it have to do with the presidency, with collusion, with the U.S. government, with national security, with anything? A hotel that was never built.
It has absolutely nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. And can I say something about that? I mean, it might open Donald Trump to a perjury charge if it was true. But if you take your mind back, 20 years ago, when Bill Clinton was impeached because supposedly he had committed perjury, the Democrats basically said that in a minor civil matter of that nature, involving a personal thing, perjury of that kind is not an impeachable offense. I'm going to go much further than that. I don't believe this story. I think anybody who looks at it should not believe it. There's no real evidence to support it. I don't believe a word Michael Cohen says. I don't think anybody should. And there is no evidence verifying this story.
Can you go over
I don't even think it goes that far.
Right. Can you go over because I want to thoroughly debunk this story, because I agree with you. It's beyond stupid. If you put a timeline on this, supposedly Trump instructed Cohen to lie about this Moscow hotel. Yes. Correct?
Yes.
But what is the timeline? Supposedly. This is what Cohen says.
Yes, I mean, that's the story, exactly. I mean, what we know is that Cohen and a group of associates within the Trump organization, including a very dodgy character called Slater, I believe his name is Slater, who pretended that he had contacts in Moscow that he didn't have, tried to set up some kind of a hotel deal in Moscow. Apparently, it was not going to be built by Donald Trump's organization. It was just going to be branded as a Trump tower, as a Trump hotel in Moscow. They then contacted, on the advice of this man Slater, the Kremlin press office by sending, as I said, an email through the
because they have such good and close connections to the Kremlin that they go to the website email.
Exactly. We discussed it in an earlier video. The people of the Kremlin looked at this and said, "This is absolute nonsense. What's this got to do with us?" And they sent a polite letter suggesting, if you want to discuss it, you should discuss it, all this business of a hotel, with the city council in Moscow. And if you like, you can come to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum with around 10,000 other people from around the world. And so they got a brush off. And supposedly this thing went on for rather longer than people had thought, and where Donald Trump at one point suggested that this whole thing fell apart in January 2016, it actually fell apart sometime around June 2016, only I'm not really sure that's strictly accurate, because I never saw that this thing got off underway anyway. So, I mean, we're talking about a deal which looks to me almost a fiction. And the extent of Donald Trump's personal involvement in it looks to me very much open to doubt.
Yeah, so Cohen was doing business before Trump was even president, or Cohen was trying to get not even a hotel. He was trying to get a franchising to franchise the name the Trump name
That's right.
for a hotel
Right.
before Trump was even U.S. president.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. Long before
So
Trump.
what does this have to do with anything?
It doesn't have anything to do with anything. I mean, it just goes to show again what a dodgy character Michael Cohen is, because clearly, and this is what I think, and I think all the evidence bears this out, what it shows is that Michael Cohen was using his personal connection to Donald Trump in order to enrich himself.
To make some money.
Exactly. Coming back to that submission that the Southern District of New York, the District Attorney of the Southern District of New York said, that is exactly what they said. They said this person was taking advantage of Trump to make money, basically by using Trump's name, but to make money for himself. It's there in the documents, and it's amazing to me that people haven't seen this.
They're running with it. Here's my question too: if the Trump organization in 2015, 2016. Trump organization wanted to give its name to open up a hotel in London. Is Trump colluding with the UK?
No, of course not. And the same goes with opening a hotel in Moscow. It's a perfectly valid and lawful thing to do. I mean, anybody who suggests otherwise is talking nonsense. I mean, there is nothing here. I mean, this is a giant, a nothing burger. Whereas, to come back to it, the Bruce Orr revelations are very serious indeed. Anybody who is worried about how FISA warrants were obtained to spy on people on the strength of a dodgy dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton should be concerned about it, because we now know that the Justice Department and the FBI knew the actual provenance of that document right from the start.
Does it trouble you, finally, Alexander, does it trouble you that a character like Christopher Steele, an MI6 former spy, could undermine the U.S. election, American democracy, ignite a soft coup against a sitting U.S. president like he did? I mean, that is the essence of the story. This one guy in the UK it's snowballed to result to where we are today. One former spy.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Can I just say, I mean, it's not just entirely one guy. I mean, clearly several people were involved.
Sure, but
I mean, Fusion GPS was involved, and the Hillary Clinton. But you're quite right. Christopher Steele was the point man. And I come back to what I said at the start of our program. The only evidence anyone so far has produced of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia is this dossier which Christopher Steele provided, and which we now know is materially untrue, and which was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. So it should be extremely troubling that this was used in that way, and that it was used firstly to try and swing the election in Hillary Clinton's direction, and then to delegitimize Trump's victory after he won it. And I speak as somebody who is not a US citizen. I would have thought that US citizens would be very worried about the way their law enforcement agencies allowed themselves to be manipulated in this way to interfere in an election and in the political processes of the United States in order to prevent Donald Trump first being elected president and then exercising the role of president after he had been constitutionally elected.
It's incredible, Bruce Orr's revelation. Why do you think this is all coming out now? I mean, Bruce Orr has testified before in the past, and Comey's and all these guys have testified, and I think a lot of them have probably perjured themselves. But now it seems like we're getting the truth from Bruce Orr. Why?
Yes, well, I mean, you're right actually to bring up the question of Comey, because of course Comey was in charge of the Justice Department, well, of the FBI at the time when Bruce Orr was providing all this information. And we know that McCabe, his number two, Comey's number two, knew all this information because Bruce Orr told him. And we must assume that Comey himself did. And nonetheless, Comey was one of the people who signed off on this Russiagate investigation based largely on this dossier. And to my mind, that is reason enough to have sacked him. Now, why are we getting all this information now? I'm afraid the reality of this whole affair is we get it in dribs and drabs. We get this information in dribs and drabs based upon what Republicans in Congress have been able to root out. So we get this information. They then inform journalists like Solomon and Byron York about it, and we read about this. But we read about this in places like The Hill and in the Washington Examiner, important news media outlets unquestionably, but hardly the New York Times or the Washington Post. And that's where the problem is, because, of course, one would expect that big news outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and MSNBC and all the others, they should be running with this story. They are not, because, let's be blunt about it, they're running a campaign alongside the FBI or people within the FBI and the Justice Department and the Democrats against Donald Trump. And they want to keep this kind of information away from the American people.
Yeah, MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, they are the deep state. They are part of the deep state.
Yeah,
and so,
essentially. Well, I think
the mouthpiece of
that.
The deep
they're
space,
either part of it. They're either part of it or they're allied to it. I think some of the people undoubtedly are part of it, actually.
Yeah, if they ran with a story like this, it blows apart the whole 2 years of invested time in this. Yeah.
Well, indeed. How many years? And how much damage has it done? How much damage has it done to relations between the US and Russia? And how damaging it has been and distracting for the United States itself and for its own political processes.
And you've damaged many lives. You know, Carter Page, Papadopoulos.
And it's damaged very lives.
Michael Flynn.
Papadopoulos, Michael Flynn, all of these people have had to face a criminal investigation based upon a dossier, because that's where it all comes from in the end, a dossier which was dodgy and untrue, and which the FBI and the Justice Department knew right from the start, as it now turns out, had a provenance in Hillary Clinton's campaign and was compiled by a person who had a massive bias against Donald Trump and wanted to stop him becoming president. Incredible story, and it's coming out, Alexander. One word comes to my mind that you were explaining. Why is this coming out now? It's called trickle truth. It comes out in little trickles, step by step, but eventually the truth does come out. Eventually the truth comes out. Well, it is trickling out, and sooner or later, and I do believe this, the trickle will become a flood. There will come a point where they simply can't control the story anymore. How soon that will be, I don't know. But eventually, the whole story will become known. Yeah, and eventually, I think somewhere, I like to believe that somewhere in the future, Trump will release all the documents, from the Hillary emails to the FISA warrants to everything, to the Rosenstein stuff and the Comey, unredacted, in full. It'll just, I'd like to think that, and I'd love to read those documents. Exactly. Alexander, and I think that will happen. Yeah, I think that'll happen too. It's just a matter of time. Let's see when it does happen. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help support the Duran. Patreon and PayPal links are in the description down below. Please donate to us. It really helps us out a lot. And you can go to theduran.com and you can see all the articles that Alexander is reading and linking up to every day. And of course, don't forget, you can get a copy of this show on iTunes and on SoundCloud. Go to iTunes, go to SoundCloud, follow us. You can get the audio formats.
Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.